You can understand how giving a president that kind of power is kind of like profoundly un-American. We have our system of due process in this country where everybody that lives here is afforded the right to have a fair trial, judged by a jury of their peers. Trump seems to be floating the idea of just like getting rid of all that.
Let's hear the question from this very low-rated anchor at CB.
Thank you, President. Do you plan to ask President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First, and
Sure, President.
he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional
That's not what they ruled.
done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that
It's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. It's not up to us. You can't ask the president who's sitting right next to you. This is insane. At this point, they are flagrantly ignoring a court order, just like very blatantly. Yeah.
as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters.
This guy also was not here illegally, was he? Abrego Garcia is at the heart of a Trump administration legal battle after a court ruled that he was wrongfully deported to a supermax prison in El Salvador, where alleged members of MS-13 and the Tren de Aragua gang are being held. There's a Salvadoran prison citizen who was an illegal immigrant residing in Maryland, United States, until Immigration and Customs Enforcement took him into custody on March 12th, 2025. Okay, I think what happened was that a previous judge had ruled that he could not be sent back to El Salvador. That he had protections from being sent back to El Salvador is what happened. Specifically, like, you can deport him, but don't deport him to El Salvador. And they sent him to El Salvador.
Foreign Affairs. If they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
So will you return him?
And you are doing a great job.
Thank you.
Stephen Miller, wait a minute. Can you just also respond to that question? Because, you know, it's asked by CNN, and they always ask it with a slant, because they're totally slanted because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So, it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As two immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization.
That's not, he's incorrectly describing the series of events here.
That meant that he was no longer eligible under federal.
There was a single confidential informant, I believe, that alleged that this guy was MS-13. That was the only, there was no other evidence to support the notion that this guy was in a gang. In any gang, let alone MS-13. And a later judge came out and criticized that finding that he was an MS-13 gang member. It is, of course, preposterous, the notion that Donald Trump couldn't simply ask the president to return this guy. He could obviously do that, and there's nothing stopping this guy, Bukele, from returning this man to our country.
Federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So we had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here.
Wow, what is this framing? Oh my God, bro. We kidnapped him and sent him to one of the worst prisons in the world. And he's describing the possible, the hypothetical return of this guy to our country as a kidnapping.
That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the president could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador.
That's not what the court said, right? That's not what they said, right? Didn't the court say that the administration has to make a good faith effort to bring him back, that he was afforded due process?
Who, again, is a member of MS-13, which is, I'm sure you understand, little girls, murders women, murders children.
Jesus Christ. This is fucking, I feel like this is how I parody MAGA all the time, like on this stream, you know, with the way that they fearmonger about like certain specific ethnicities, and he's just a living embodiment of it.
Is engaged in the most barbaric activities.
They do this straw man where it's like, oh, you want them to like little girls in the United States? You want us to bring him back so he can like your daughter? Is that what you want? It's so bad faith. It's unbelievable.
Activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan to
But the
ask for
Supreme
anything
Court's
to get him
asking
back?
to,
And
that-
what was the
Facilitate
ruling
extradition?
in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
In our favor?
in our favor against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual at El Salvador's sole discretion was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
No version of this legally ends up.
All 9 Supreme Court justices just ruled that everyone is entitled to due process. People here illegally are deported swiftly all the time. Absolutely nothing and no one is stopping the government from detaining and deporting dangerous criminals. You're sending people to a foreign gulag who have no criminal record and have been checking in with ICE. Your legal theories are utter nonsense. You're breaking the law and violating the Constitution. That's what John Favreau tweeted at Stephen Miller just a couple days ago, yesterday. I'm trying to find the Supreme Court ruling here, but they did not rule that the district court had no authority to direct the administration to make an effort to bring this guy back. Is he just bald-faced lying here? Is that what it is?
Up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it per the court can only be directed to him.
I asked
¿Usted lo
President
liberaría,
Bukele, what is your,
Presidente
can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm suppose you're not suggesting that I smuggle terrorists into the United States, right?
It's
I mean,
always
how can I return him to the United States? Like, I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course,
Excuse me? What? What do you mean smuggle? They would send a plane and you would put the guy on the plane and then the guy would be flown back. What do you mean smuggle him into the United States? Smuggle a terrorist into the United States? What is the evidence that this guy is a fucking terrorist, by the way?
I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him.
That's not the question. That's, of course, like a massive straw man. Nobody's talking about smuggling a terrorist into the country.
The United States.
but you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing, I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country of the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people. Marco, do you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, Stephen Island, I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport
After a court specifically said, don't send him back to El Salvador.
people back to their country of origin, except for
And they just ignored the court order. They just ignored it.
Venezuela that wasn't refusing to take people back or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President. No, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
And that's what the Supreme Court held.
Hold on. Who's got a link to the actual ruling? The Supreme Court said the Trump administration is required to facilitate the release of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the Maryland man who was wrongly deported to an El Salvador prison days after justices said the Trump administration didn't need to meet a Monday night deadline to return him to the U.S. Yesterday's decision partly grants and partly rejects the Justice Department's emergency request contending to a district court judge's order that Abrego Garcia be retrieved from a prison where he was sent along with other men alleged to be members of the Venezuelan Tren de Aragua gang. That means the Trump administration does not immediately have to try to return Abrego Garcia because the deadline imposed by the judge had already expired. But the administration, quote, should be prepared to share what it can concerning the steps it has taken and the prospect of further steps. I just feel like they're just blatantly lying about what the court ruled.
By the way, to Marco's point, the Supreme Court said exactly what Marco said, that no court has the authority to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. We won a case 9-0, and people like CNN are portraying it as a loss, as usual, because they want foreign terrorists in the country who kidnap women and children. But President Trump, his policy is foreign terrorists that are here illegally get expelled from the country, which, by the way, is a 90-10 issue.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago, and they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say
The way that they...
Why do you go over and over, and that's why nobody watches you anymore. You know, you have no credibility. Please, go ahead.
President Trump, thank you so much. How many illegal criminals are you planning on exporting to El Salvador? And President Bukele, how many are you willing to take from the U.S.?
As many as possible. And I just asked the president, you know, it's this massive complex that he built, jail complex. I said, can you build some more of them, please?
Junior, what's up, buddy?
As many as we can get out of our country that were allowed in here by incompetent Joe Biden through open borders. Open borders. You probably hear open borders and you can't even understand it because nobody can understand. Nobody smart or with common sense can understand it. So we have millions of people that should not be in this country that are dangerous. Not just people, because we have people, but we have millions of people that are murderers, drug dealers. They've been allowed to come into our country by other countries that were very smart. When they heard that this very low IQ president, and by the way, I took my cognitive exam as part of my physical exam, and I got the highest mark, and one of the doctors said, sir, I've never seen anybody get that kind of, that was the highest mark. I hope you're happy with that. Although they haven't been bugging me too much to take a cognitive, but I did do my physical and it was released. I hope you're all happy with it. I noticed there's no question, so probably you are.
By the way, guys, you can take a look at his physical. This man, they are alleging that Donald Trump weighs 24 pounds more than me. Same height, 6'3". He wears those platform shoes though, so who knows how tall he is. We'll say 6'1". I swear to God. Those platform shoes that he wears add at least, you know, 2 inches to his height. But whatever, we'll take it at face value, 6'3", okay? They're saying that Donald Trump is 24 pounds bigger than me, okay? I'm gonna suck in my gut a little bit here. That man is allegedly 24 pounds bigger than me, which is straight comedy.
But the cognitive, they said to me, sir, would you like to take a cognitive test? I said, did Biden take one? No. Did anybody take one? No, not too many people took them. I said, what about Obama? Did he take one? No, he didn't take one either. I said, let me be the only one to take one.
Okay, this is proof that he should be required to take a cognitive test every month. Because this guy's losing his mind. He's literally demented. The shit that he just makes up on the fly is...
But I've actually taken them 3 times already. I like taking them because they're not too tough for me to take. But we had a great physical exam, so I know you're going to ask that. And the doctors who are total professionals, Walter Reed Medical Center, they're great people. And I visited a soldier that was badly wounded, incredible soldier, lost his leg, and spent a lot of time with him. I mean, great with his mother. And it was really a very great thing. They do a phenomenal job. I just want to say, Walter Reed, I was there for, 5-6 hours. You were there with me. But I took a full physical, and it came out perfecto, so that's good. That means you've got me for a little longer.
Would the U.S. be willing to pay for those facilities to be opened if new ones were going to be built?
I'd do something. We'd help them out.
I have the Jew with $2. Peace goes live. Tag him in for the SCOTUS ruling. Yeah, maybe.
Facilities, very strong facilities, and they don't play games. I'd like to go a step further. I mean, I said it to Pam. I don't know what the laws are. We always have to obey the laws, but we also have homegrown criminals that push people into subways, that hit elderly ladies on the back of the head with a baseball bat when they're not looking, that are absolute monsters. I'd like to include them in the group of...
Hold on. I just want to be sure.
I said it to Pam. I don't know what the laws are. We always have to obey the laws, but we also have homegrown criminals that push people into subways, that hit elderly ladies on the back of the head with a baseball bat when they're not looking, that are absolute monsters. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country, but you'll have to be looking at the laws on that, Steve, okay?
United States citizens, guys. Let's go. It's kind of scary, guys. I mean, it's obviously, it's not kind of scary. It's super scary. Like, the president has very clearly been using any pro-Palestinian advocacy as a pretense to cancel people's visas and deport them and detain them for weeks in facilities hundreds of miles away from where they live in the United States. And now he's just very casually floating this idea of sending American citizens to prisons in El Salvador. You could very easily imagine, you know, him coming out and saying, using as a pretense, like, you know, support for BLM. So like if you're a United States citizen and you know you have social media posts from 5 years ago supporting the BLM protests, then maybe you could get a knock at your door and end up in a El Salvadoran prison. Like, this is so far beyond the pale. It's probably the scariest thing that he's doing so far. Obviously the tariffs are the most impactful thing he's done, but this new kind of just like very outwardly authoritarian side of him, if it got worse, could be really, really, really bad. As foul as this suggestion is, the suggestion of sending United States citizens to foreign prisons, which surely, like, you would have, is it 8th Amendment, which protects from cruel and unusual punishment? Yeah, that's the 8th Amendment. Surely that would qualify for 8th Amendment, right? Like, if we're sending American citizens to like a supermax prison in El Salvador, for as foul as it is, the mere suggestion of sending American citizens to a foreign prison, I don't have a lot of confidence in Americans right now that there would be like a mass movement against it, because usually it seems to be the case that people need to be directly impacted by policy before they take any kind of stance, like any kind of firm stance. So, you know, when we think of like recent examples, like the COVID measures that certain local and state governments implemented during COVID, that impacted people directly, and it caused a lot of upheaval. A lot of people were upset about it. And then when obviously like economic policies, so, you know, as these tariffs drive the cost of goods and services up and up and up and up, and they drive stock prices down and down and down, like this is going to be something that directly impacts a lot of people. Even people that don't have like 401k holdings, that has the potential to mobilize a lot of people in opposition to the current administration. I just don't know about like these deportations. Like people, I feel like this is an issue that people read about, and maybe I'm speaking for my own personal, like people read about it and they think to themselves like, oh God, this is horrible. But they don't really like think about it beyond that. They don't really think about it like during the day when they're out doing their thing. You know, it's like this thing that's kind of far removed from the people that it doesn't impact. You know what I mean?
I was having open borders. I said,
I would like to think that if Donald Trump started sending American citizens to El Salvador, that would prompt like a large protest movement, but I don't feel super confident that would happen.
Criminal from all over the world is going to be dumped into our country.
So Americans at their core just have no empathy. I mean, I don't think that's true. I mean, like, it would mobilize a certain percentage of people. It would mobilize like Democratic voters. I mean, you would find, I'm sure, opinion polls that had showed 80-90% of Democratic voters would be furious about doing something like that. But it's the people in the middle and certainly right wingers. They don't give a flying, right? So Slim Chunk, you're talking about like the more like extreme examples of criminals in the United States. So you point to like violent criminals or files. I think it's all well and good to romanticize the notion of sending murderers and files to supermax prisons in El Salvador, but I feel like that is a very slippery slope. Like, what's to stop the next president from expanding the like fear of criminality to things that are a bit more arbitrary? Like, what if they decide, what if the next president comes in and decides, I want to send people, you know, who were arrested at a protest or something like that, right? Like, you can understand how giving a president that kind of power is kind of like profoundly un-American. Like, we have our court system. We have our system of due process in this country where everybody that lives here is afforded the right to have a fair trial, judged by a jury of their peers, protections against like unreasonable search and seizure, cruel and unusual punishment. And Trump seems to be floating the idea of just like getting rid of all that, not having that. I feel like as an American slim chunk, you should be deeply wary of any president who wants this kind of power. That's a huge red flag. If a president wants the power to circumvent the courts and to circumvent the current system that we have in place.